Okay, so this is chapter or unit 4 that we have the rest of the semester to finish. And there are only 2 chapters from the book that deal with unit 4 material. That's chapters 11 and 12. Chapter 11, you will find as you read the first 2 sections of it tonight, can be kind of a nightmare. There is so much variety and detail in that chapter related to how cells communicate to each other that, it is not easy reading. But I still expect you to read through it and do your best with taking notes on it. I want to avoid testing you on chapter 11 for a few reasons. One, a lot of the chapter 11 content as it's delivered in chapter 11 isn't really how you would see it on the AP exam, in my opinion. There is just so much detail that I think as long as you have the general idea and feel for some of the major vocab concepts, you're going to be fine on the AP exam. So what I decided to do, especially since we have kind of a weird part of the semester coming up with Thanksgiving break and then I have no idea how it will look in those 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then the semester will be over. What I decided to do was to break up a typical test grade into basically a 50-point project and a 50-point kind of half test. So the project that you're looking at with the description here is one that I thought is an everyday kind of concept that you can hear about in the news and in life in general, that relates to a lot of the stuff that chapter 11 is trying to relate to you. Chapter 12 is basically about a concept called mitosis, which is how cells divide. There is some connection between the two, which we'll talk about, but that is a much more straightforward, here is a process, here are the steps, here is the order of those steps, here's what happens at each step. Identify cells that are in these different phases. Chapter 12 is much more straightforward and much more conducive to actually writing fair and test questions that I think you could prepare for in a traditional way and show your knowledge. So essentially, in the second week after we get back from Thanksgiving break, you will have a shorter test that's only chapter 12. Between now and Thanksgiving, I hope to cover the main points of chapter 11 and everything you need to know in chapter 12 about the test. And then when we get back from Thanksgiving, we'll review chapter 12. And then again, that second week after we get back, you'll have a test. And on the test day, this project will be due. And then that gives me the rest of that week and the last weekend of the semester to finalize grades. And then the last week of this semester, we will look at just some general information on viruses. And I have a little science documentary that I always like to show on the last day of the semester, just before we go off to Christmas. So that's how we're working it. Now, let's talk about this project because you're actually going to have today to choose a topic and to choose somebody to work with if you want to work with someone and start the research that you need to start for this project. So you have this sheet here that I've put a few personal notes on in case you're wondering why there's writing and markings all over it. But essentially what you're going to do is choose a class of drug. And I went mostly with kind of regulated drugs not just any medicine in general, because most drugs that are regulated by, like, the FDA and or at least the ATF are ones that affect cell communication. The word drug is a very general term. But I have a list of drugs, and I have at the very end of that list a little note that if there's some classification of drug that you would like to do your project on that's not listed, then just let me know. So chapter 11 is about how cells communicate with one another. Many drugs all the drugs on this list interfere or promote some component of communication between cells. So that's your list. You and your bio buddy, or you by yourself, will choose one of these drugs or class of drugs, and then you will basically answer the 8 different parts or questions that are there in the middle of the sheet. Now, this is going to be a fairly long video. I mean, 6 to 8 minutes is not, that's not a quick video. But there's a lot that you need to dig up about your topic and then present in a video format. You can use whatever video format or whatever creativity you want. You don't need to be in the video personally, but I would probably narrate it with your own voice instead of, some other way. There needs to be a narration and it needs to be somebody in your group. I do have some added detail at the bottom about, making sure you include citations at the end, have like a credits thing where you say what you did and have citations. And I really want to stress that you need to relate it to chapter 11 material, which we will talk about over the next few classes. So that is the main idea of this project, is to take a kind of real world problem and a real world substance that has biological effects that connect to cell communication, which is the topic of chapter 11. And essentially, I want you to marry those two things, the topic with at least some of the concepts in chapter 11. Basically, in chapter 11, they go through a huge number of different ways a cell can communicate with another cell. There are many different ways. They go into deep detail, and the drug you pick as a topic is probably going to interact with one of the receptors your book talks about, or interfere with one of the pathways your book talks about in chapter 11. So that's where you want to pull in the chapter, is where it is specific to the drug you choose. Just a few more quick things, and then I'll let you kind of get started with selecting a topic. And you will want to research these different ones and see which topic you would like to pick and work on and can actually find information about. One, a lot of the drugs on this list are illegal controlled substances, okay? Only like one of them, caffeine, is actually one that some of you are actually imbibing at the moment, or at least I hope caffeine's the only thing that you're imbibing at the moment from that list. As a result, when you Google some of these words, the school filter blocks you, okay? Yes, so cocaine is one of the drugs on this list. It does interfere and interact with certain receptors within your body, but if you just type in the name of a drug, you're probably going to get blocked. Now, to get around that, you can find out a bit more about the drug, maybe use the classification of the name. You can also find out what receptors are going to interact with the drug, and then search the receptor that drug interacts with and get your information that way. So you might need to whittle around the school filters a little bit in order to get good scientific information about the topic. Also, keep in mind that you can't just find a video on this topic and then remake the video. That is copying, that is cheating. And, there was a little bit of that. I don't really consider it cheating from the inner life of the cell perspective, but there is a narration of the inner life of the cell on YouTube. And as long as you didn't read it verbatim, I did not hold that against you. But be careful with that on this project and do not get an honor violation. Email me if you're working by yourself or if you're working with somebody. Email me the names and the topic, let's just say by the end of the week. I don't need that today. And today you're going to have about 45 or 50 minutes to start. And between now and Thanksgiving, most of what I want to do is in every class, which is only like the next 3 classes, cover information and then work on your project. Cover information, work on your project, cover information, work on your project. And then that last day before Thanksgiving, we're actually going to go down and do a little microscopy work with some slides and look at basically do a lab that's connected to chapter 12. This is due on the same day as your half test, and that day is December 8th, which is a week after the day we get back from Thanksgiving. So we get back from Thanksgiving break on a Tuesday. The Tuesday after that, we will have a test on chapter 12, and this project will be due. So we have a lot of time, but that time needs to be used because unless you work on it over Thanksgiving a lot, there actually isn't quite as much time as there may seem to be. So today in class, I'm going to check your notebook. I'm going to try to finalize some other grades. And you're going to look through the list of topics and start collecting information on them and make sure that that's the topic you want. And again, I guess the last thing I would say is before you're like, oh, I love coffee, I'm definitely going to pick caffeine, look up and see how much information there is about caffeine. Look and see if this seems like an interesting topic that you can make a 6 to 8 minute video on, and go from there. So that's what we're doing today, and I will stop the video and post it in a minute.